Splendid. Let's see. Okay, so wonderful. Hello to everybody who is watching and will be watching in the future. This is No Exodus's Talkback. We have a majority of the cast with us right now, along with our co-music directors and our co-music producers. So let's get started. My name is Robin. I'm the moderator, and we have questions. Feel free to send in your questions in the chat. We are receptive and we will get them answered. Let's begin. So, first question. This is for the cast and also the music directors if they want to answer, but the cast should go first. How difficult was it to learn about Judaism, expressions, language, accent, etc., and play it as if it was part of their experience? Let's start with Abby.
Hi. Okay. So luckily I had the pleasure of being friends with the director, Alethea, before the play started. And she introduced me to at least some aspects of Jewish culture. So I kind of had like a basic level knowledge of Judaism. And then I think it was challenging to get the pronunciations right for a lot of the things, like the word halal, I kept saying wrong, and I think I just said it wrong just now. It was definitely like a challenge, and I definitely like wanted to do the best that I could to, keep the authenticity of the language. But I think the cast was really helpful and really supportive, and Alethea was a great reference to have for the process.
Right. Awesome. Megan.
So kind of like with the same thing Abby said, it was kind of difficult to get the pronunciation, but Alethea was really helpful. And she made it really easy to learn. Like she made a sheet with like the pronunciations, so it made it a little bit easier.
Cool. Did you do any like auxiliary research, anything on the side?
Yeah, I did like look up how to pronounce some of the stuff because that's what I was having trouble with the most.
Right. Cool. Sam.
Pronunciation for me was definitely probably the hardest part. I'm still not quite sure that I got it, but it was an experience and a good learning experience, and I'm glad to have immersed myself in Jewish culture a little bit.
Awesome. I think the entire cast and crew could say the same thing. Kai, what about you? What was it like to learn about Judaism?
Well, I mean, there's not really anything I can say that hasn't already been said about it. It was difficult at first, but of course, Alethea made it a lot easier for everyone to, get used to it more.
Right. What would you say would be like the hardest aspect and the easiest? Give us both.
The hardest one was making sure I could pronounce everything right while I was singing as well. There was that one clip at the very beginning of the show when people were singing and also speaking Judaism. That's probably not right. I'm sorry. But I think that was the hardest part, was like figuring out how to make the two things work at the same time.
Right. Understandable. What about you, Stephanie?
It wasn't exactly too hard for me because I am in fact Jewish, so I kind of knew what was happening. If anything, it was just a little bit of review. So yeah, it wasn't really that hard for me.
Nice. Connie? You're muted.
Yeah, I am. It wasn't too bad. When Alethea gave us like the pronunciation sheet with like how to say each word broken down, that was really helpful. And I mean, just that. And it was cool to learn about stuff and kind of piece it together with what I already knew. Right. And yeah, it was fun to like see references to the show pop up in my daily life, and I'll be like, oh, Alethea, guess what I found? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, it was like everyone was saying, pronunciation was probably the hardest part, but we got there eventually. So yeah.
True. Anka.
I'm actually half Jewish, and I do a Seder every year with my family, so I kind of going in knew what that was like. and knew the experience of that. It was, as everyone else has said, pronunciation was the hardest thing to do. So
Right. Awesome. Well, we all know how it came out, and it's such a wonderful experience. I want to hit the music directors and Max next. What was the process of creating music for the show? Let's start with Elena.
So the process, there were a few different steps. So first we took in everyone who recorded music for us. They were all volunteers. So we
Right.
took all of their parts and their instruments, and we put that through a software program called MuseScore. And through that, we made the piece itself, and we arranged the parts for everyone. And then after that, they recorded it. We put the recording through another software called Audacity. And through that, we were able to piece everything together. And once we put that out, that was what you heard during intermission for our parts.
Nice. Was the production all you guys, or did you and Max work together at any point in conjunction to produce? Max or Elena, either one of you guys can answer this.
Okay. So Max and Kira and I, we didn't work together necessarily. We did have some of the same pieces. I know Max did an arrangement for Claire de Lune as well. But Kira and I worked on Where, When, and Claire de Lune separately with the volunteer musicians that was played during intermission.
Gotcha. And for Kira, I know you did a lot of transcribing, everyone did, but I saw in your application that you did a lot of transcribing. What was that like? Was it difficult?
So I would say it wasn't as difficult. Specifically, we worked with MuseScore, and I know with Finale and other high-tech music programs, transcription is a little bit easier, but with MuseScore, you do have to do it by hand. And we spent the majority of our time either transcribing music, which again didn't take very long, fortunately, or putting the tracks all together in Audacity, which took a lot more time. So all in all, it was a really fun process and not that hard.
Awesome. Cool. Interesting. I want to ask this next one for Kai, because we all know that his personality is so extremely different from David's. Was it difficult to step in and out of an emotionally demanding role?
Emotionally demanding is a very, very good way to put playing David. I guess, yeah, it was difficult. It's not the kind of role I have ever played before. I don't think before this I had ever played a role that was so aggressive and so, I don't know, antagonistic, I guess.
Right.
So it was very difficult for me to wrap my head around the fact that, yeah, I'm playing a character that's acting in a very different way to how I would otherwise just normally do things. Yeah, it was very difficult to manage, but I think I did an okay job.
Right. I think you did great. I have to
Thank
say,
you.
it was so impressive to watch you go in and out of that so effortlessly. Very incredible to watch. You did so good.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question is for actors who played the same character at different ages. What acting choices did you make to prove that you were the same character, but 20 years earlier / later? Let's start with Megan this time.
Well, I think if it was in the live setting, I would have gotten to see how Abby acted more. So it was kind of difficult to try and do the same things as her. But when we did have rehearsals together, I took notice of what she did and I tried to do some of the same stuff. But I think our characters are a different attitude, young versus older Wendy. So I had to bring a little bit of her mild, I don't know how to describe it, but she has a different mindset than younger Wendy does. But I think when we had rehearsals together, I tried to think about what Abby did and try to apply it to my acting.
Right. Cool. What about you, Abby?
Okay, so kind of a similar answer. And then one thing that I had to keep in mind was that I had lived through everything that Megan's character was going through. And I really took some time by myself in between rehearsals and stuff. I would read the scenes with young Wendy to kind of understand her pain and why that changed her, because I took a lot of notice to how Megan acted in rehearsals that we did have together to kind of see the difference between her optimism and youth. And I was like, okay, how do I how do I signify that I'm the same person that went through that, but that those events have changed me? And it was kind of tough because I would have loved to like be on a stage, share a stage with Megan and get to like see it so we could be more connected. But, you know, we worked with what we got. And I think it was a really cool and challenging thing to do, if that makes sense.
I agree. What about you, Stephanie?
It was kind of difficult because we didn't always have rehearsal with Nikki, but when I did, I would really pay attention to like how she was playing her character. I would try to absorb like what I was seeing, and I would try to like portray it in my version of Carmen.
Awesome. Cool. I actually have one more question for the music people. We can shoot this one at Kira. What was it like to work with a vocalist? Was there any, or Max, if any of you guys mixed or designed any of that stuff, was it hard/easy to deal with people's voices and layer it on top of instruments? Because I understand the instruments are its own category, and to mix something like that is like, I guess, in its own box. But when you work with vocalists, what was that experience like? And have you ever done it? That's the other thing. Kira, go first and then Max.
So quite frankly, actually for me, it was quite nice because the thing that you can do with vocalists and especially with woodwinds, I worked predominantly on Where or When and did do a few editing things on Claire de Lune, but again, mostly Where or When. And Emily's voice was such a nice blend with the instruments, particularly the woodwinds. And it was a really nice way to kind of smooth the piece out. So it wasn't as jarring in the fact that you heard digitally recorded parts. It was more of a smooth, actually, you know, nearly professionally done type of track in that way. And so the vocals were really nice.
Gotcha. Awesome. What about you, Max? Did you work with any vocalists, or what was mixing like for you?
Well, luckily, I didn't really have to do much of that. I know it's a pretty big challenge, but I was mainly tasked with just doing digital music. So I was working just on my computer with this keyboard. So yeah, that's just all I had to do.
Awesome. Nice. I'd just like to remind all of you who are watching, feel free to ask all the questions you want in the chat. It's free, it's open, we will answer your questions. And next up, we have one from Aiden Needle for the directors. What did it feel like to direct without in-person interaction? I'll let Alethea go first, and then I'll answer.
Thanks, Robin. So yeah, it was very, very different. At first, I was really worried because I had been planning to direct this show since March 2019. March 2020 got a little bit of some exciting news that we would be at home for this production. And so I was worried about losing, you know, some of our warm-ups, the ability to sort of really get into our characters and the ability to get out of our characters as well. But I was so pleasantly surprised at how awesome it was to virtually direct. There were a few setbacks where, you know, you're mirrored on Zoom. So when you're telling someone to look right, you have to say left so that they look right on the screen. But I felt like, you know, it was nice to see everyone's face when you don't ever see anyone's faces. It was really nice to connect with everyone. I felt like it was a learning experience for me, and I hope it was a learning experience for the actors too, that they were able to get, you know, some acting experience and some training and, you know, just from doing this virtual theater. But I think that it really worked well.
Yeah, no, I agree. What stands out to me was casting. I remember seeing everybody in the room and thinking of how absolutely cool this would be to see on stage. And directing without in-person interaction is interesting because I think the organization of things just becomes different, right? It could be more clear-cut, and at the same time, it's a lot messier with technology and its inhibitions and everything that goes on. So I would say I surprisingly found this to be so enjoyable, especially during quarantine, where interaction with other people is limited. This was such a great outlet. It was such a great way to see art. It was such a great way to communicate culture through art. I thought it was just absolutely wonderful, and I hope the cast and crew will agree with me. Any cast members, what scene was your favorite to perform and why? I'm gonna give this one to Connie.
My favorite to perform was the scene where I was Groucho Marx, because it was really fun to do a different accent, and like the comedian mimicking his personality, like the actual guy, was fun to do as Oscar. And then to transition that to less of Groucho and more of just creepy Oscar, I guess you could say. That was fun. I don't know. It was fun for me to do. And the rehearsal process of that was very entertaining with the costume malfunctions that ensued.
Right.
But yeah.
No, yeah, I agree. It was such a great scene. You and Alex just killed it. Let's see. What was the writing process of the play like, Alethea?
Oh boy, here we go. So I started writing the play in its more sedery, Passover-y form in September 2018. It was sort of like this weird blob of thought in that 2018 summer. And I was not sure if I wanted to write a play about a band, not sure if I wanted to write a play about a Seder. And so it just kind of like became a conglomerate in September. I started the first draft September 1st, 2018, finished September 30th, 2018, and it was terrible. It was absolutely the worst. And so I think it went through about 20 so revisions before we got to the final draft. I think that was like November 2019. It was very fun. It was also very exhausting, just like writing can be. But I think that it was definitely like my sort of extracurricular activity that I, when I wasn't doing homework, I would kind of be working on it. If I was in a study hall, I'd be kind of working on it. And I think that the most important thing to note about the writing process is just sort of how ideas developed. And I think that a lot of it happened, I would like go on these long walks and listen to music. And all of a sudden I would have an idea. I was like, oh, well, this character feels this way because of this thing that happened to them. And I'd be like, okay, that's a thread. I need to thread that in for the next draft. So I would have a list of threads that I wanted to thread in for a next draft. And I would, check them off once I had threaded them in. They usually weren't very good the first time I threaded them in. But as you know, you polish the entire draft after you've done your threads. And then you have another draft. And then the next time you do a draft, you're like, oh, the way I wrote that thread was not really great. And they polish that up a little bit. You have another draft, right? But yeah, I think that seeing it all come together, like even in November, I was very worried. I felt like it, I wasn't sure if it was good. Like I was sending it to people. I was like, does this make sense to you? Is it too Jewish? Like, do you understand the references? Like, even though, there are a lot of Seder references. But I think that it came together. I really feel like, it worked. So that was nice.
Were there any like major roadblocks? Or like what were some obstacles that happened in the process? Drafting, editing, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that I had originally wrote it so that it would be performed by adults in an adult setting. Like I didn't ever think that it would be performed. And if at most I was like, oh, well, maybe, like in the JCC auditorium sometime. Right. With adults. And so, there was a lot of adult language. There was a lot of drugs and alcohol, actually. And I feel like, a lot of teenagers start, writing a lot about a lot of things that they don't really know about, just to kind of get a feel for the story. I was trying to write a story about a band in the 70s and what are they going to do? Drugs and alcohol, right? So I when I found out that we were going to be for sure directing this as the school play, I was like, okay. Well, so I had offered it. I was like, I'm writing this play, I can take out a lot of the stuff that's in it currently. And I think that just kind of like I made a draft that was like no swear words, and I took all the swear words out and I was like, this is a lot better writing because I didn't, drop the same word a million times. I had to find other words. I made a draft, no alcohol, and I was like, this is a lot more meaningful now that, people are saying what's on their minds when they're sober. And, that doesn't apply to all writing, of course, right? I think that just in this case made for a better play.
Awesome. Cool. Interesting. For the seniors, Abby and Kai, what are your plans for next year? Abby first.
Okay, so I'm planning on going to the University of Pittsburgh, and I don't know exactly what major I'm going to pick, but I want to do something that allows me to work with creative writing. I'd really like to write for like TV one day. So it's kind of following that path.
Awesome. Kai?
For me, at least for the very foreseeable future, I'm just going to be sticking around this, as Alethea put it, the cover of a George Orwell book, City of Syracuse. I'm going to be sticking around here working. I have a part-time job scooping ice cream, so that's that. I'm trying to write more music. I write music that's hopefully going to get me more than a single. Yeah, I try to write music. I'm trying to write my own book series, so there's going to be a lot of work being put into that. But yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing with my time, just kind of working and trying to follow my passions a bit more.
Awesome. Sweet. Okay, cool. We have a question. I was surprised to hear someone say that she thought Eli was still alive after all these years. That made me wonder about the range of interpretations of the plot, given how surreal some of the scenes are. Let's start with Sam. Sam, if you could tell us a little bit about how you developed the character of Eli, especially given that he's so different from all the other characters, acting wise, and also in dialogue. You had to almost like give the character to the audience in a different way. So how did the development of that go about? And then after Sam answers, we're going to go around our cast and we're going to see how they thought, or like what they saw when they first read the script. Sam?
So Eli's an interesting character because he's probably the most extreme internally, but externally he's so like, I don't know the best word, mild-mannered, I guess. But so most of the time when I'm playing Eli, it was a process of like trying to like it was a process of working through his anger and then trying to convey it like an artist would, so kind of like through music and more subtly, and then through the more surreal bits you kind of let that anger through and show it more. But yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Beautifully said. And for the rest of you guys, we can start with Anka. When you first read the script, what did you see? What kind of story was it to you?
For me, it was definitely a story about a mother and a daughter, and I'm really close with my mom, so that kind of like hit home very hard. And kind of like I saw a lot of myself in Ruth. I was really surprised because going into the auditions, like we had like 2 monologues or whatever, and I definitely, the Ruth one felt the most personal to me. And then as I read the script, I was like, whoa, I am this character.
Right.
And it was really cool. I like loved the script the first time I read it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's an aspect of relatability to this whole thing that, you know, the audience is really, they can connect to it because everybody has the kind of experience with an adult somewhere where where things are just lost in translation, and it's such a beautiful script in that way. Connie, when you first read the script, what did you see?
I also saw mostly between a mother and a daughter, but it was also a lot of like between Wendy's like trying to deal with the crazy of her past and like kind of try and not let it affect her as much as it does, even though she's trying not to let it. I don't know if that made sense at all, but that was kind of like what I thought the plot was. And then like Anka was saying, it was really relatable, even though Oscar and I are not the same kind of person. Obviously, it was like I saw a bit of my personality in him, because I remember one rehearsal we were talking about how he uses like humor to just kind of bury like the not so fun stuff that he's like feeling, and like I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. But yeah, it was fun to see this story play out and like to get more connected and familiar with the character so I could play him.
Right. Megan, what did you see when you first read the script?
So like Anka and Connie were saying, I saw a lot of mother-daughter relationships, and I was like so impressed with the script the first time I read it. Like it was really hard to believe that Alethea wrote it in such a short amount of time. And like they were saying, I could see a lot of myself in the character. At first, I was a little nervous how I was going to play like a college kid from the 70s. I didn't really know how that was going to work out, but I could see a lot of myself in Wendy, and there's a lot of things that I could like relate to.
Awesome. What about you, Stephanie?
I don't really remember what I was thinking during like the read through the first time I read the script. I remember when I was like reading what the show was about, like before I even auditioned. I remember thinking like this is a lot like Mamma Mia 2, which is a very good movie, by the way. So yeah, I'm just, that's a really boring answer. I'm sorry, but I really don't remember.
Okay.
But yeah, like everyone else said before me, it's like I did see like a lot of mother-daughter relationships, and like a person really trying to kind of ignore what was ignore the past, but like she really needed to come wait, I don't know. She really needed to like face her trauma and get through
Right.
it.
Exactly. What about you, Abby? When you first read the script, what was going through your head?
When I got to the end of the script the first time, I was really angry because I felt like there wasn't closure in the ending, and I was like I was confused, and then I had to really sit with it and sit with what I had just read, and I kind of learned like, no, there was closure, and I kind of had to take a moment to sit back, and I was like, wow, like it must be a really good play if I felt so strongly. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I felt so strongly because I saw myself in nearly every single one of those characters. And I feel like I was just blown away by how human the story is, if that makes sense. Like it's maybe there are a lot of like surreal elements to it, but it's like it hits home in a lot of ways. It touches on so much stuff that a lot of people go through, and I really related with all of the struggles of pursuing art versus having stability, and especially because I read it when I was applying for college and deciding on my own future. I was blown away. A whirlwind of emotions is what I would say.
Nice. And Kai, what did you think when you first read the script?
When I first read the script, I was very hooked. Like Abby said, the story was so human, and just it felt so real. Kind of this next bit is a little bit like everyone else is saying how much of themselves they saw in their characters, and then my normal personality is like polar opposite to how David is portrayed in the show.
Right.
Because in the show, like in the events that we get to see in the show, David is really not a good person.
Mm-hmm.
But the part that hit hardest for me was that he used to be. There is this one moment in the show when they talk about David climbing a tree in protest, and like that David sounds like such a better person. And you just have to wonder what led that David to become the David that's in the show. Like it is the same person. And just the knowledge that these people are changing because of something, and that everything has reasons for it to be happening, like that really struck home with me. That was something that I loved about the show from the moment we finished our first read through. I sat there just in love with how real the whole thing was.
Right. Yeah, there's so much intricacy to all of these characters. It's honestly very, very impressive. I have a question for Elena. What instruments were used to make music other than vocals?
So there's a whole list to this. I personally played the violin. There was another violinist, then viola and cello, and that made up all the string players. And then there was a slew of different woodwind instruments and brass instruments. For Claire de Lune, there was different clarinet parts. We actually didn't have like a lower bass part, which kind of brought everything together. So I believe Kira actually played a clarinet, and then we used our software to make it lower and make it sound to what we thought would be more of like a bassoon to make a lower part. And then in Where It Went, it was like classic jazz band style with we had trumpets, saxophone, clarinet there as well. There was a solo clarinet. And then in both pieces, there was a large piano part. So there was a lot that went to it and a little bit of meshing that we did. Also, we had Max on the trombone. I forgot to mention him. I'm sorry, Max. But yeah, so the vocalist was one part, but there was a whole other instrumental part that we also had to mesh together in both Claire de Lune and Where When. But it was
Nice.
really fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I bet. Max, was the keyboard and the trombone like the only two instruments that you played?
I was lucky to help out with trombone, and then the keyboard was just for the digital stuff that I did.
Right, producing and stuff.
Mhm.
Awesome. Let's see. For the actors, what tricks did you come up with to help you act as if you were together, even though you were doing this over Zoom? I think Alethea can answer this a little bit too, because we had to deal with a lot of like sight lines, a lot of props and stuff. So we can start with Alethea on the technical stuff, and then the actors will move on after that.
Yeah, so I think that the best part about that was that we actually got to be together. I remember a couple of people would like give me suggestions about how I might want to proceed with this, whether I want to do like a podcast version of it or like, you know, a lot of people said they should, since, you know, you've got all these inconsistencies with camera quality and audio quality, they should all record their parts in isolation and then you can edit it together afterwards. And then I thought, like, you know, I don't want to sacrifice the sort of magic of the theater aspect to make, you know, an emotionally dry, a possibly emotionally dry film. And so I kept trying to like think about all the ways we could possibly be in the same digital space, but create the same project. So, you know, there were a lot of steps that went into make sure everyone had green screens if they needed them, the right video equipment, audio equipment. And once we had that, we settled on using Zoom. We recorded each Zoom rehearsal and we used the spotlight feature. So it was only on one person, but we would run through the scene for every time someone was being spotlighted, which was pretty annoying for the people in the 90s cast, especially because you'd have to do the same scene 5 times, maybe more if, you know, people wanted to get a better take. But yeah, I think that it was definitely difficult, but, you know, I think that we had a lot of laughs. We made a lot of good memories from it. And I think that the being in the same place and not having to record all by themselves, I think made it a lot better. And I really wouldn't have wanted to do the play if we weren't able to be all together, because I don't think that's what the play is about, nor do I think that's what the drama show is about, JD, or theater in general. So yeah.
Right. No, I agree. There's like a chemistry aspect to theater, and doing it in isolation, you don't get the same response. You don't get to act off other people's acting. It's interesting. And we did have to make not a lot of sacrifices, but a few cuts here and there for physical things that would happen that we just cannot do over Zoom. But all in all, I think the production wrapped itself up really nicely. Let's see. Did the musicians read the script or participate in all in the rehearsals to get a sense of the story? Their musical interpretations seem to suggest this. Let's start with Kira, and then we can move on to Elena and Max.
So as far as we know, we operated solely through Google Classroom and we did not participate at all in the specific rehearsals. But what we did try to do is within some of the recordings, when we give musicians the assignments for Claire de Lune and for Where or When, on certain assignments we did provide like a recording of the MuseScore piece, which has kind of computer animatronics playing the parts instead of actual instruments, which did give the musicians a chance to hear how they were supposed to play.
Right. Elena, do you find that difficult? Not being there to kind of like take the temperature of the story and having to make music based off of assignments, essentially?
Yeah, that part in general, I think was probably one of the more challenging parts, in the aspect of like, at that time, when we first kind of not assigned, but when we first joined to be music directors, I think it was probably a month to like a month and a half out. And at that time, you guys were still filming, and I I don't think like we exactly knew where the music was going to go at the time. So it was a bit challenging trying to. I mean, I of course read the synopsis and I knew some of the parts that were going on in the play, but I didn't know. I didn't read the script. I didn't know any of that. But I was really happy with how it turned out, and I was really happy that that it fit well in the play.
Right. I think your contribution, all of you guys, is just so nice. It tied the whole thing together. What about you, Max? Did you find what was difficult about not having seen the script? And what was, I guess, if you found any silver lining in that situation, what was it?
Well, I actually, I think at one point I asked Alethea if I could see the script because she would have me make some music for transitions, and she would give me like a kind of like feeling for different kinds of music, and I would just make a couple different ones for each, and well, for one of them during one of Sam's scenes with the ones with Groucho Marx and that, I live recorded it and I set up a video, and then she gave me like how to interpret some of the parts, and I would just record it, and if you listen to that scene, then it's just me playing it on one instrument, like reacting to all the different parts the way that Alethea and I were interpreting it. So that part I definitely did read, and but most of the other stuff was just background music for a certain feeling.
Nice. Awesome.
And it was so cool. I'm sorry, I had to interrupt. That, especially the mirror scene. And if you think about it, like I didn't actually know that you had been like live pianoing or however you would call doing that. But you know, it definitely feels like what kind of you would think in your head is going on in that kind of situation. It feels like little thoughts popping into your head is what, I don't know, that's what it sounds like to me. But it's just so cool to watch and to sort of like feel it flow with the scene. It's awesome.
Thank you. It was really fun to make.
Awesome. How did all the actors manage to tap into and convey such deep adult feelings of loss and regret at the way one's life can end up so different from the one you imagine in your youth? Let's start with Abby, because I can imagine Wendy's, like the scope of her loss and her trauma is huge. And to portray that has got to be quite difficult.
Yeah, so Wendy is unlike any other part that I've had. And from the minute I read the script, I was like, it would be awesome to have this part because of the way that it really tests you. And I'm going to actually reference one of my favorite movies, which is Moonlight. It follows this one character, Chiron, and there's 3 different actors that play him at different stages in his life. And the director actually had the different actors never meet until the movie was finished, until they were finished filming. And if you look at it, you would never be able to tell because their interpretations seem like they are playing the exact same person. And so I feel like what I'm referencing here is like the like youth versus oldness. That was not a good wording of what I was trying to say, but it was kind of like the dialogue was already a tool there to connect me to the character and to help me. I'm kind of not making sense right now, but it was like a tool to kind of connect me to the character, and it was like my own reactions, I guess, and interpretations were kind of like came naturally, I guess, because of like the way that you have the story. And I am not making sense right now. I forgot what I was trying to say.
Totally fun.
So bad. Let me start over. Basically, it's funny because my parents are divorced, and so my mother kind of inspired me for the role of Wendy, not in a bad way, but I kind of saw what it can do to someone and how they can have intentions for their life to turn out a certain way, and then it changes. And I mean, it changed my life too. So I don't know, I just kind of pulled from some real life experiences, and the dialogue connected me, whatever I was trying to say there. So I'm gonna stop talking.
No, it made sense. You're fine. Megan, to have been at the beginning of that, I guess, journey of loss for Wendy, what was that like to portray?
So when we first got the auditions, like we had a couple monologues, and one of them was for an older Wendy. And so when I found out I was gonna be playing like the younger Wendy, I was thinking about how I was gonna have to be like that maturity, have to bring that to young Wendy. But when we first got the script, I saw that she was a lot different than what it was in older Wendy. Like she was a lot more youthful and had a lot more optimism. So I feel like that was easier for me to play. And I guess she didn't really have like too many emotional moments that were difficult. Like the surreal parts were kind of difficult, and then the end where it got emotional. But she didn't really have like a lot of deep stuff going on because she hadn't really had that hard of a life until the end of the 70s part.
Right. Watching you play that young Wendy is just kind of heartbreaking in like the best way, because the audience knows that this is just the beginning of all the things that she's about to go through, and it's the start, and we're watching her not collapse, but more like it's tense to watch, and you did such a great job of acting it so well.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Sam, speaking of hardcore loss, what was it like to play Eli, who had kind of lost so much, and then we see him at young Wendy's age and at No Exodus, like at the band in their youth? You kind of like carry so much trauma that the adult versions of like Wendy and a little bit of Carmen have so many years down the line. What was it like to just play that at such a, what you know to be such a young stage in your life?
It was pretty hard. I've never really experienced quite that much loss in my life. So I guess I was just trying to, follow the script, follow the beats, try to put as much emotion in the character, but also not try to overplay it, because I feel like it's very easy to overplay those emotions, and just work through them slowly. I also had the benefit, most of my harder scenes emotionally we did earlier rather than later. So it was easier to work out of them versus like getting deeper into the script and, ending on such a like down note. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge.
Right. Awesome. Kai, as an actor, when you see David, quote unquote, lose the band and lose the things that keep him afloat and things he was taking advantage of, how did you feel? Oh, and also, what was it like to act it out, knowing that you may or may not have had to do that?
It was really, really interesting and honestly pretty difficult to act out as David, because of just, I honestly don't know what words to use to describe it. David, yeah, I'm at a loss for words. I'm sorry, but just my journey like through the rehearsal process was kind of the opposite of what Sam said. The last scene that I filmed was by far one of the most intense. The final funeral scene with David. That was the last scene that I filmed, and that is when David is at his lowest point. I think everyone can agree that is when David is at his worst. Like everything is just out on the table with him, and there's nowhere else. Like he can't. At that point, he just has to accept the fact of what he's been doing, and yeah, it's again. I'm kind of going the same way as Abby now. I don't feel like I'm making sense anymore. It was definitely a lot emotionally to play David, and to just have to channel so much anger and loss and sadness all of the time. Yeah.
Interesting. I know David is, I think he's a hard character to play for anyone. I mean, that aspect of manipulation is always just like in his conscience, and it's difficult to draw out from a script, and it's difficult to bring to life, I guess.
If I could pop in on that question for 1 second. Filming that last scene with Kai and Nikki and Megan, the scene after the funeral, I think that I've said this probably a couple times in other, people asking me, realizations I had while I was directing. And I think that I don't remember if maybe I had threaded it in somewhere and, just forgot about it, or if I sort of had this new realization after directing that scene. But I think that especially with Kai and Nikki's acting in that scene, I realized I kind of just like David's character arc became a lot more clear to me. Even though I wrote it. I think that like, when you're looking at the whole play and kind of thinking about character arcs, you see Wendy and you see Ruth and you see Eli, and there are these big shining ones that you notice first. And then I definitely saw David's shine through right there, because I think that what I realized is that scene when he's like freaking out about losing the band is kind of a guise. I would say that it's the first time in his life that he's ever felt responsibility. And it is not for the baby. It is because he kicks Eli out of the band a couple scenes earlier. And where does Eli go? Back to his dad's house, right? And that's probably why he leaves. So I think that is what's really killing David in that scene right there. And the way that Kai really knocked that out of the park, it was really emotional. And so I just kind of sat back and I was like, wow, I did not realize that. And it's so much more clear. And that's why we have actors.
Yeah. Yeah, Kai did such a wonderful job being David. as negative as that might sound, you're a wonderful actor. It was so great to watch. I have a question for all of the actors. Why did you want to audition for this? Let's start with Connie.
Okay. So I hadn't been planning on it for a while. It was more like during so I did the school musical for the first time this year, and I was like, oh, this acting thing is actually something I enjoy, because I had always done like the pit and like instrumentals, which I still love, but because I'm thinking about it for the future, I wanted to explore not just like the musical side of theater, but also the play side, and like, because I'd never done anything like that before. And I'm really glad I did, because it was a really cool experience and eye-opening and making my decisions for the future harder. But it was
Right. I think you brought so much to the role of Oscar. I mean, it was so wonderful to see a friend like that on a screen. I hope I can speak for everybody watching that Oscar's a person that we all want in our lives. Wonderful. Anka, what inspired you to audition for the play?
I'm honestly not sure. Like, I've done shows before and I usually do the musical, but this was my first full-length straight play. And I honestly don't remember why I initially decided to try out, but I'm glad I did. I'm not sure what to say.
No, that's understandable. I mean, I think a lot of art is about a spur of the moment decision, and when you want to be a part of something and have that community, there doesn't have to be an auxiliary reason, right? Like taking part in a script that's great is just what it is, and it doesn't always have to be this like big I'm repeating myself, but reason behind it. Art is good enough. How about you, Megan? Why did you want to audition?
So I wasn't like really sure if I was going to audition or not. I was talking with Nikki about it and we were thinking about doing it together. And after the musical, like, it was really cool to work with the people older than me and like to gain a lot of like knowledge and see how they were acting, like see how I could improve myself. And I'd never done a straight play before. I've only done like musicals and musical theater. And I thought that it'd be a really good experience to like work on my acting and see like how other people have different strengths and what they do and stuff like that.
Right. Awesome. What about Stephanie?
So I auditioned because of this fact about me, and that fact is I'm a very big theater kid. I have been seeing shows at JD since as long as I can remember, so I always knew I wanted to be in the musicals, which I did do the musical this year. And a couple of years ago, my family saw a couple of the drama shows a couple times, And it was just something like, hey, drama, theater, I'm gonna do that. So it's just something I've always wanted to do because I know that they do it. And I've always ever done musicals. So doing like a play with no songs, that's something I've always wanted to do, and I did it. So that's why I auditioned.
Right. Awesome. What about you, Abby?
I mean, I've been doing the drama show since 10th grade, so I really would have auditioned for whatever it ended up being. But I think like what appealed to me most about this play is it was like unlike anything I had ever been a part of before. And I mean, it's like an exciting thing to be a part of because it's a new show. And now I get to like be like, yeah, I was in an original cast of a play, which I mean, it was a high school play, but still, it was an amazing play, and it was something new and exciting. But I would have auditioned regardless. I love the drama club.
Awesome. What about you, Sam? What inspired you to audition?
I go to the Young Playwrights Festival every year. I try to, and I think maybe 1 or 2 years ago, I went and I saw Alethea's Viewer Discretion Advised, and it was phenomenal. And then I saw that she was doing a full-length show this year. I was like, I kind of got to get in on this because this is exciting, and I like her writing. And I'm really glad I did. It pushed my comfort zone, and I got to meet a bunch of great people. Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Kai?
For me, I've been doing musicals for a very long time, but the first time, not the first time. Last year, I auditioned for the drama show after doing the musical because I said to myself, you know what, this year I'm gonna try it, and I did. And so then I came back and auditioned again this year. And one of the things I love about like plays as opposed to musicals, I love musicals with all my heart because it is just so much fun to do a musical, I think. But plays, in my mind, can hit a certain aspect of storytelling that I love so much. My favorite part about storytelling is characters, is getting to see a character at one point and another point and understand like the journey that it took for that character to get there. And that's something that you can do a lot better in a play where you're not saying, okay, we haven't broken into song in a while, so we got to do that. I just think plays are overall a better medium to explore characters and explore emotions. And I just really love that in stories.
Awesome. Cool. A question that I asked, and then I think I hit two of you. I remember Connie answered with Groucho Marx, the Groucho Marx scene as their favorite, but I'm going to go around once more and ask everyone what their favorite scene was to film. And I think this is applicable for the musicians as well, because I can ask, what was your favorite piece to like produce or record or transcribe? So we're going to go and hit Sam first. Sam, what was your favorite scene to film?
It was probably the door scene, Zafoon. It was a lot of fun. I got to play like 2 different characters that day. My lines weren't too hard to memorize, so that's always a plus. But yeah, it was just a really fun day.
Awesome. Abby, what was your favorite scene to film?
I think it was the same scene as Sam, the door scene. Once again, really cool, unlike anything I had ever done before. And it was like it was like an array of 50 different emotions in one scene that had to happen, it was amazing.
Right. Awesome. Steph, what was your favorite scene to film?
I don't exactly have a favorite scene. I guess any interaction my character had with Oscar, I really liked, because like 1, Connie is amazing. And 2, I just really liked Carmen and Oscar's relationship. I thought they had a little bit in common, and I just kind of liked the relationship they developed.
Right. Awesome. What about you, Kai?
For me, I'm gonna have to go with the prologue because in my mind, the prologue is one of the most actually, let me start over. Yeah. The prologue was definitely my favorite scene to film. Like you get to see David in a little bit of a better light. Like you get to see David kind of before he starts falling apart and becomes insanely antagonistic and stuff. But there's also like there's hints of that in the dialogue. There's like tiny hints of like him thinking that this is his band and that this is his thing, even before it gets to the surreal part, which that was a ton of fun to do. Like the changing in expression to move into that surreal scene, that was a lot of fun. But just the sitting around the table before that, like just it's just four people talking, and you really get to see all of these characters just kind of existing, which is really cool.
Right. Awesome. Anka, I can't remember if you answered already, but if you would like to remind us. Oh, okay. What's your favorite scene to film?
My favorite scene to film was Korek, which was the sleepover scene with Paige and Ruth. It was really fun because there were like only two of us. And that was also one of the scenes where Ruth was like really happy in a way that she wasn't at any of the Seder scenes. Like she wasn't particularly uncomfortable or like annoyed with her mom, which was really fun because I feel like there was a lot of that. And so to have a nice break where she could just be having fun at a sleepover was fun. I also loved the God is like a camera guy monologue, which we didn't film. I recorded it separately, but that was amazing to do.
Fun. Connie, you mentioned that shooting that Mark's scene was your favorite. What was like the research? Did you do any research behind it?
Yes, I watched multiple, like, I didn't find any like free full length Mark's like acting things. So I watched a lot of like best of Karl Marx compilations on YouTube. And the first time I just watched them to enjoy them. And then the second time I watched just to like kind of get how his personality wove into how he spoke. And then the third time was to just like try and get the accent down.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was mostly what I did. And then Alethea sent me pictures for the costume and my artistic skills were displayed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Megan, what was your favorite scene to film?
I didn't really have like a favorite specific scene. I liked the challenge of the surreal scenes. Like it was difficult, but it was really fun to do. And I also liked the prologue because it was fun to like just do it with like it was one of the happier scenes in the show, and I liked the feeling of that.
Awesome. Elena, what was your favorite part of like contributing music for this?
It's honestly very, very challenging to decide. I personally worked, I mean, Kira and I both worked evenly throughout both pieces, but I kind of put together Claire de Lune, and I think like I had never done anything like that before. I had used MuseScore to like write music, but I'd never taken someone's recording and putting it together. And I recorded first, and then I believe one of the woodwind parts came in, and I put them together, and that was like, it was just a great moment for me. I believe I actually like texted Kira, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just did it. Like, I think just starting to put everything together and trying that something new, I think that was probably my favorite part. And of course, hearing it all together, the final product, you just hit play and it starts playing, and it's all the work of all these musicians. It's between those two for sure.
Awesome. I'm a little bit curious now that I know that you've done Pit for other shows and other concerts and stuff. If you could choose between doing something like this where it's pre-recorded and you get to really like refine it for media like a play / musical, or being in Pit, having it done live, which would you choose?
It's very, that's even harder than that last question. I think personally, I would probably say the Pit live performances, just because there's nothing like a long rehearsal where everyone's working on the exact same thing at the exact same time, and you work so hard just to make it perfect. I will say there are a lot of benefits to having it pre-recorded, and also the fact that yesterday I rewatched No Exodus just for the fun of it, and that's a lot harder to do with a live performance, obviously, unless it's pre-recorded. So there are definitely benefits to both, but I've just had more experience with Pit.
Right. Awesome. Max, what was your favorite part of contributing music to the show?
I really liked when Alethea would text me and then give me a task, and then I would just try to get it done as fast as possible, and when we would communicate about it. It was really fun. And one of my favorite things that I did was putting together game show music for the Doors scenes. I had the privilege of doing that, and like distorting it a little bit. I really liked working with the software and then seeing what I could do with it. And then I enjoyed watching the show and seeing what kind of choices Alethea took with it and stuff like that.
Right. Awesome. What about you, Kira?
Kind of building on what Elena said, I thought the coolest experience was really getting to put together a virtual ensemble. And especially being in COVID, a lot of our ensemble days have kind of gone out the window with the fact that we can't gather in person. But especially when we started getting the recordings and they started trickling in from Google Classroom, it was a really cool experience to open up Audacity and get everything lined up as close as we could get it and just hit play, and it sounded like a symphony coming out of a computer, which is really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that's got to be so much fun. Alethea, how did you keep your motivation to write this play throughout, COVID, I know you spent such a long time doing it, and it's hard to dedicate yourself to a project in such a long form. What was I guess your gas pedal?
I think that, I don't know, I just like the way that I personally function is that I constantly need to be doing something. Like, and I think that's how I was able to involve myself so strongly in the editing process as well. But I had just come back from a Jewish arts camp where I majored in theater and minored in puppetry. But it was a super, super awesome experience. I made so many friends and I was super creative there. I was like on a creative high, right? And I got back home and I had nothing to do, and it was summer, and I was like, oh my God, this is the worst. And it wasn't a great summer either. I wasn't doing so great. And I was watching a lot of like documentaries, random documentaries. I watched one about the Mamas and the Papas. I was like, that's interesting. Kind of want to write a play about a band. And so I started like drafting a couple things about a band. And again, this is like that blob of brainstorming process that I call Summer 2018. Mm-hmm. And, it went nowhere. There was no play about a band. And I think that, once I started drafting and having started that first, draft before the start of junior year, like a couple days before the start of junior year, and just kind of like, not abandoning it like I've done with my previous longer projects, I think that was really helpful in just kind of keeping myself on task for a lot of other things. Like, it was kind of an extracurricular activity. And I think that just kind of having that structure of being able to come home and work on it, or, work on the weekend or work on it on break, I'd go out to Starbucks and work on it. I think that it was just really helpful to me personally to have something to sort of look forward to, even if I never really thought it was going to get performed anywhere, but I was like, well, I'm just going to keep working on it and making it better. And I think that it's really nice to have that.
Right. No, yeah, I agree. All right. We have 2 more questions left. This next one I want to make really, really quickly, but it's for the entire cast. Kind of rapid fire. How does everyone relate to the themes of the play? Let's start with Connie.
Okay. The main themes, not at all, to be honest. But there was one scene in particular when Oscar was talking about the painting that he did at camp. And although I didn't relate like to what exactly he was talking about, I found that scene easy to do because his fear of it happening again was like something that I kind of have felt recently and seen actually happen again recently, like with the recent events in the news and stuff. So it was easy for me to connect to him in that time because I was like, yeah, man, like I get it. That's some scary stuff there. And it was, yeah.
Awesome.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah. What about you, Alka?
I definitely related to a theme with Ruth, which was like not knowing exactly what your plan is and kind of trying to figure out what your interests are, what your like path is going to be. Because I have no idea. And I think Ruth was in that same boat for a lot of the show. And that was kind of what I really pulled out and related to.
Awesome. And Kai?
I think the one that resonated most with me was the one that kind of Ruth and her mom Wendy, like Ruth and Wendy, like were kind of at odds about for most of the show. Like, what do you do after high school? Like, do you pursue the things that make you happy, or do you pursue the things that are going to keep you stable? And that's the one that really stuck with me, because that's exactly where I am now, and that's kind of where I'm going to be for the next year, maybe. Because right now I'm not entirely sure what the rest of my life is going to look like. So I kind of have to still figure that out.
Awesome. And Stephanie, how did you relate to the themes?
I didn't exactly relate to the themes a lot. I mean, I guess I kind of related to it because everyone in the show was Jewish and I'm Jewish. One thing I related to though was a scene with Ruth and Oscar when they were at their religious camp and they were talking about like the hand motions. That gave me a lot of nostalgia because I go to a religious camp and I knew exactly what she was talking about. So I did relate with that, and that made me really happy the first time I read the script. That it's not just my camp.
Awesome. Nice. And Sam, how did you relate with the themes?
I definitely agree with Anka. I mean, not knowing what you're going to do is kind of what high school is all about, and trying to experiment with that, especially through art. And it can be seen in the play. And then also in my life, I mean, all I'm trying to do is just experiment with different things and try to figure out what I want to do. And that's exactly what Ruth was trying to do.
Right. And Abby?
I mean, I related to a lot in the show. I think what hit home most for me though was Ruth's consistent kind of suppression, and same with Paige's consistent suppression of their like creative desires and their true passions and what they wanted to pursue versus going for a more steady career in like math and science, because that was something that took up my entire junior year. I thought I wanted to be a nurse, and I just found myself so unexcited for my future. And so like just kind of seeing my future career as something I have to do rather than something I want to do. And I feel like both characters really struggled with that and brought light to that, and how so many high schoolers these days feel pressure with that type of stuff.
Right. Yeah. And Megan?
I can definitely relate to what Anka and Sam were talking about, how like Ruth doesn't really know what she's gonna do and she's trying to figure it out. And I think I can relate to that a lot because I have no clue what I'm gonna do with my future. And I think you just have to like figure it out. And I can also relate to a lot of the relationships in the play, like between Wendy and Ruth and Wendy and Carmen, the dynamics there.
Awesome. All right. And our very last question was, how can we see the show? So, No Exodus, our first premiere is going to be up until the 21st of this month on our YouTube channel. It's available whenever, wherever. Feel free to tune in. And this summer, we may or may not have more No Exodus events. So enjoy the show if you see it again. And yeah, wonderful. Awesome. Alethea, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I would say if you haven't checked out our fundraiser, that's still a link in our description of our show. Check it out. If you can donate, that's great. If you can't, it's okay. It's also a QR code in our intermission of our show. Yeah, thank you all for coming tonight and asking such great questions. We really appreciate it. This was so nice. It's nice to have everyone back together, even if it's on Zoom. And yeah, thanks so much for coming. And really, it's been awesome. Seriously. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you, Robin, for hosting as well.
You're welcome. Thank you for writing the show. Awesome.
All right. I think we're gonna end our live stream here. Goodbye, everyone. Stay tuned for more events this summer, and I'll see you soon.